Prime Minister Modi is now headed for Laos on 10th and 11th for the two key summits. As India increases its engagement with this region, what lies ahead? What does it mean for India's Act East policy at a time when it's celebrating its 10th anniversary? What should be our priorities for the next 10 years? That's our big focus. And joining me on the discussion today is Professor Chintamani Mahapatra, who's the founder chairperson of the Kalinga Institute of Indo-Pacific Studies, and Don McClain Gill, who's joining me from Manila as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking out the time. And Professor Mahapatra, let me start with you, sir. Paucity of time, crisp answers, sir. How do you read these very important visits, especially coming in the wake of Prime Minister Modi's Brunei visit and, hosting the Malaysian Prime Minister before that? So there's a concerted push towards it. Connect the dots for us, sir. How do you read it, its importance?
Prime Minister Modi is the Prime Minister, is the leader who crafted the Act East policy. Before that, it was only Look-East policy. In last 10 years, he has attended personally 9 ASEAN summits, except just one. And he has given top priority to ASEAN in the Indo-Pacific strategy of India. ASEAN centrality is key for success of India's Act East policy. So this particular visit by Prime Minister Modi at a very critical time when 2 wars are going on in the world, and there are possibility of even military exchanges across the Taiwan Strait. The Chinese have been threatening all the time, and Chinese muscle flexing going on in South China Sea, the way they're troubling Philippines every other week. So this particular meeting is important because ASEAN and India today should both engage engage China economically and try to contain unilateralism of China, not China's growth. It should be a engagement policy, both contain the ambition, unilateralism, Chinese ambition to have hegemony over the region, to
Yes.
dominate the region, and at the same time compete with China and
Yes.
economically engage with them.
Okay.
So it is very critical.
It is indeed very critical. Don McClain, how do you read India's growing presence in an area which in the last decade has been at the receiving end of increased Chinese aggression, repeated acts of aggression by Beijing?
Right, thank you, and I completely agree with Professor Mahapatra and setting the line for India's engagement with Southeast Asia. I think one thing that we need to take into consideration here is that there's mutual respect between New Delhi and its Southeast Asian neighbors. It is not a relationship that is based on a significant level of rigid transactionalism, but a relationship that is based on mutual understanding and shared goals. And of course, India's position towards the challenges many maritime Southeast Asian states are facing, such as the Philippines, is something that brings India closer to the respective security calculations of Southeast Asian states. So the Philippines and India, for instance, the relationship is continuously moving towards new heights, particularly since 2016. We see that level of reciprocity as Manila is more and more willing to incorporate a rising India within its security calculations.
Right.
And similarly, India has shown a lot of proactivity towards the concerns of Southeast Asia.
Okay, we have that map playing for our viewers to know which are these 10 countries that are part of ASEAN and their importance. But Professor Mahapatra, let me ask you then the question around trade. And I think that's essentially the most ironical part. ASEAN countries, they face the greatest aggression from China, but they also have the highest trade exposure to China, making all calculations that much more complex. How do you see India's role in such a complicated trade and security calculus?
India has an Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative, and ASEAN has ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific. India and ASEAN are going to collaborate not only in economy, trade, investment, but also in defense and security sector. The Philippines has bought India's BrahMos missile. Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand are also showing interest, and we are negotiating. Last year, we began even exercises in the maritime domain with ASEAN countries, and 7 ASEAN countries contributed their naval crafts to hold exercise in South China Sea. And let me underline here again that nobody is trying to contain China's growth. Everybody is interested in containing and managing China's unilateralism. And this is where India and ASEAN must come together, not only in science and technology and trade and investment, but also in the military sector. The whole region has to be protected. The whole region should be democratic, and no single power should be allowed to
Yes,
dominate the region. And that is why ASEAN cooperation with India is equally
yes,
important. And we don't have an agenda of containing China, by the way. The Chinese are reading very wrong things
right.
into our statements.
Okay. Uh, Don, then the fact is that what would be your top three expectations from India as it increases engagement in this region? There are trade realities. There's also a presence of Quad there. ASEAN doesn't want to be part of Quad in a Quad plus sort of an arrangement for their security concerns. So what would be your top two expectation as New Delhi increases engagement with this region?
Well, interestingly, you've mentioned about the Quad, and I've always argued, from a Philippine position and a Southeast Asian position, that it is in fact because of India's role in the Quad, its participation, that ASEAN countries in fact look at Quad more positively compared to, for instance, AUKUS, because recognizing strategic autonomy within India is something that converges well with the interests of Southeast Asian states. Now, you're asking me what I expect. Well, I do hope that there would be a consistent momentum from India towards Southeast Asia. And if we look into the 2024 State of Southeast Asia survey by the ICEA's Yusuf Ishaq Institute, when asked the question to Southeast Asian recipients, who would you choose as a third party to hedge against the US and China? India was the second choice of country. In terms of a state, India was the second choice right after Japan. It has even outranked countries like Japan, South Korea, Australia, or the United Kingdom. That shows that there is a clear realization of the capacity India can deliver, and it's all about engaging consistently. Prime Minister Modi has shown a lot of consistency even at the wake of the
Right.
G20 presidency. He still attended in Indonesia as well. So these are very important points that shows sincerity.
Okay, quick 30 seconds, Professor Mahapatra, completely out of time. Next year, India celebrates its 60th anniversary with Singapore. What would be your one key policy expectation? Quick 30 seconds, sir.
Singapore is one of the most important members of ASEAN and one of the strategic partner of India. In fact, the maximum investment from ASEAN to India comes from Singapore. And both in terms of investment as well as trade, Singapore is the most critical country in ASEAN. And next year when we celebrate it, I hope that relationship is going to be boosted further, improved
Right.
further, and we are going to celebrate it in a very big way.
Mm-hmm. All right, Professor Mahapatra and Don McClain Gill, thank you so much for speaking to me on India Global.